Fear has already stolen more dreams than failure ever could, and it's doing it silently inside you. In this video, we're not just exposing fear, we're dismantling it. I'm taking you deep into how fear hides behind logic, how it delays your destiny, and how to finally take back control of your own mind. Because your dream is waiting and time isn't. Fear, in its purest form, is nothing more than a state of mind. It has no hands to hold you down, no chains to lock your potential, no voice unless you give it one. And yet, for most people, it is the most powerful force that controls their every decision. Why? Because they mistake it for reality. Let's pause right there and think. When we say we are afraid, what are we really saying? We're not responding to something tangible, we're responding to an image, a possibility, a projection of something that hasn't even happened yet. The mind is imagining something going wrong, and that imagination, so vivid, so persuasive, begins to feel like truth. But it isn't truth. It's just a story we're telling ourselves, a script we're rehearsing before the scene is even set. Understand this: the human brain is an incredible machine. It can calculate, analyze, visualize, but it cannot distinguish between what is vividly imagined and what is actually happening, unless we consciously intervene. That's the crux of the issue. Most people never interrupt their thoughts long enough to ask, is this real, or is this just fear playing dress up? Fear often wears the costume of evidence. It presents itself with logic. What if I fail? What if they reject me? What if I'm not good enough? These questions seem intelligent on the surface, but beneath them lies nothing but speculation. The what ifs are merely shadows dancing on the walls of your imagination, convincing enough to paralyze you if you never challenge them. Let me offer you something more radical. Fear is your imagination misused, the very tool that can be used to build visions, ideas, empires. That same mind, when focused negatively, becomes the architect of limitation. This is why so many dreams are buried before they breathe, not because they weren't worthy, not because the person wasn't capable, but because fear whispered, what if it doesn't work, and they believed it. But here's where the transformation begins. Once you recognize that fear is a thought, you regain your power. You realize it can be observed, questioned, and replaced. It can be rewritten. Just as you wrote the story of defeat in your mind, you can write a new story, one of courage, effort, and possibility. Think about how fear shows up. It's rarely loud, it's subtle. A second thought, a quiet, maybe not today, a delay disguised as preparation. It doesn't shout, it whispers, but its power grows in the silence of inaction, the silence of doubt, and so it grows not because it's real, but because you never called it out. Now, I'm not suggesting you ignore every risk or act recklessly. What I'm saying is this: fear should be a signal, not a steering wheel. Let it inform you, but never let it lead you. The moment you accept that fear is just a thought, you start to see it for what it is: not a wall, but a veil. And once you pull that veil aside, what remains is freedom. This shift in awareness is everything, because once you detach from fear as reality, you begin to understand how deeply it has influenced your past choices. You start to see moments when you didn't apply, didn't speak up, didn't risk. And it wasn't because you lacked the ability, it was because you believed the lie your fear told you. It takes courage to face this truth. It's easier to say the world is unfair, or the timing was wrong, or others had better luck. But if you're honest with yourself, you'll find that the most consistent obstacle has been the quiet voice of fear, not shouting, but whispering, maybe you're not ready. The irony is, readiness is built through action, and fear delays action. So if you wait to be fearless before you move, you'll never move. But if you move while afraid, fear starts to shrink. Each step you take forward takes a little power away from it. Action then is the antidote to fear. But that action starts with awareness, the awareness that fear is nothing more than a suggestion from the mind, not a fact from the world. And so I say to you, from this moment on, treat fear not as a master, but as a messenger. Listen, but don't obey. Observe, but don't surrender. Recognize that it is only a thought, and you, the thinker, have the power to change it. Because when you see fear for what it is, You strip it of its illusion, and in doing so, you reclaim the part of yourself that it tried to silence, your voice, your vision, your will. Fear is not real until you believe it. And belief, my friend, is a choice. You see, one of the most dangerous things fear does is not loud or dramatic. It doesn't come screaming into your life like a thunderstorm. It shows up quietly, like fog creeping into a valley, subtle, slow, almost unnoticeable until one day you're stuck, frozen, unsure. And worse, you don't even realize fear is what's holding the wheel. This is how fear paralyzes decision. It inserts doubt in the very place where certainty is needed most, your mind. And when you hesitate to decide, you invite confusion to take the lead. You start asking endless questions, not to gain clarity, but to postpone action. You tell yourself, I just need more time, more information, more certainty. But what you're really doing, if you're honest, is stalling. And in that stall, something far more damaging occurs. Life doesn't wait. Opportunities pass, doors close, the moment moves on. Here's what most people don't realize. Every major success is born out of a decision, not a wish, not a vague intention, a decision. Decisions act as turning points in the mind. They declare to the subconscious, this is the direction we're going, and from that point on, everything inside you begins to align to that outcome. But if you fail to decide, if you hesitate, debate, retreat, the mind doesn't get direction. It stays in limbo. And the longer you remain in limbo, the harder it becomes to escape it. Fear thrives in that limbo. I've seen this truth again and again. People waiting for the perfect moment to start a business, to speak up, to change their lives. But that perfect moment never comes, because the moment that was meant for action was passed over in fear. And now the mind is built a habit around hesitation, a lifestyle of maybe someday. Here's the philosophical tragedy in all this. Fear doesn't just block one opportunity. It conditions the mind to believe that avoidance is safer than action. And once that belief takes root, you become your own prison guard. No chains, no locks. Just indecision wrapped in 1,000 rational excuses. This is why the ability to decide quickly, firmly, is one of the most valuable traits a human being can develop. Not because every decision will be right, but because decision itself is power. Even a wrong decision can teach you. It can build your resilience, clarify your values, sharpen your focus. But indecision, that teaches nothing. It just delays growth. Napoleon Hill once said, successful people make decisions quickly and firmly. Unsuccessful people make decisions slowly and change them often. And that's not just a quote, it's a blueprint. The longer you sit in indecision, the more energy you leak, the more momentum you lose. And the more you convince yourself that you're not capable of steering your own ship. Now let's be clear. I'm not saying decision eliminates fear. I'm saying decision overrules fear. Fear says, wait, you're not ready. Decision says, maybe I'm not, but I'm going anyway. Fear asks, what if it fails? Decision replies, then I'll learn and adjust and try again. That's the voice of leadership. That's the mindset of builders, creators, achievers. Understand this: fear will always offer you an escape route. It will always tempt you with safety, comfort, familiarity. But behind those doors, nothing grows. No dream is born in a padded room. Growth requires movement, and movement requires choice. So ask yourself, how many times have you delayed a decision because of what might go wrong, missed out on what could have gone right? How many ideas died in your notebook because fear convinced you it wasn't the right time? How many conversations never happened? How many chances passed by simply because fear whispered later? But life doesn't give you back later, it gives you now. And now this moment demands a choice. Because every time you choose action over avoidance, courage over comfort, decision over delay, you weaken fear's grip. You take one step closer to your potential. You rewire your identity from someone who watches life happen to someone who makes life happen. You don't need all the answers to make a decision. You need clarity on one thing. What do you want, and are you willing to step toward it, even if your voice shakes and your feet tremble? So I leave you with this: fear will paralyze you if you let it. But it can't stop a mind that decides to move. Because in the war between fear and decision, victory belongs to the one who acts. Fear is more than an emotion, it's a lens, a filter. And once it takes hold of the mind, it distorts everything you see: your abilities, your future, even your own worth. It doesn't just scream, "Don't go forward." It whispers something more dangerous: "You can't." That's how fear wins. Not by overwhelming you with threats, but by convincing you that the threat is inside you. And the most tragic part, you believe it, you start to look at opportunities not as doorways, but as traps. Challenges look like cliffs, not stepping stones, people who could help you feel like threats. Fear clouds judgment. It inflates risk, exaggerates consequences, and shrinks your sense of agency, all without you even realizing it's happening. Imagine standing in a dark room. There's a rope on the floor, but if you convinced yourself it might be a snake, what do? You freeze, you retreat, you panic. That's what fear does. It turns ropes into snakes, potential into peril. And just like that, you stop reaching, stop growing, stop dreaming. And here's the irony: fear isn't responding to reality, it's responding to your interpretation of reality. The actual facts haven't changed. The challenge is still what it is, but fear warps the meaning. It attaches pain to progress. And once that meaning is accepted, your actions or lack thereof follow. This is why people with great talent and sharp minds still live small lives, because their minds are trained not to see what's possible, but what's dangerous. They don't imagine success, they anticipate failure. And the mind, being the obedient servant it is, begins to build a world that fits that vision. You see, the subconscious mind doesn't differentiate between fact and belief. It simply accepts what it's told with enough emotion and repetition. So if fear feeds it enough doubt, enough uncertainty, enough what ifs, your subconscious begins to build a world where possibility is a myth. And what do you do in a world like that? You survive. You don't create, you don't lead, you don't risk, you settle. But let me challenge you with something profound. What if the fear you feel is not a sign that something is wrong, but that something is possible? What if fear, when seen clearly, is not a red light, but a compass? Because if fear can distort your perception, then awareness can correct it. The moment you recognize that fear is just a mental construct, a projected future wrapped in anxiety, you take its power away. You stop treating it like truth. And once you stop worshiping fear as reality, the world opens up again. You begin to question it, to lean into it. You start asking, what am I afraid of, really? And often you find the fear isn't about the thing itself, but what it represents: rejection, failure, being seen, being vulnerable. But here's the twist: those very things, the ones fear makes you run from, are the gateways to your evolution. Growth requires risk. Creation demands vulnerability. Success is always dressed in uncertainty. If you run from fear, you're running from the very experiences that forge greatness. So how do you correct the distortion? You train the mind to focus on truth, not threat. You ground yourself in facts. You write your wins. You reflect on what you've overcome. You surround yourself with voices that challenge fear, not feed it, and most of all, you act in spite of fear. Because nothing rewires the mind faster than courageous action. Think of the people you admire, the leaders, the visionaries, the creators. Do you believe they felt no fear? Of course they did. The difference is they didn't let it shrink their world. They walked through fear's fog and found clarity on the other side. Let me leave you with this. If fear can lie to you about how small you are, then courage can tell you the truth about how powerful you are. Because beyond fear's illusion is the life you were meant to build, not the one you were taught to settle for. The greatest power any human being holds is the ability to decide not to wish, not to wait, but to decide, because decision is the starting point of all achievement. It's the moment a man or woman stops reacting to life and starts shaping it. But fear, the silent enemy of all dreams, is the great paralyzer of decision. It doesn't need to scream or shout. All it has to do is whisper, "What if you're wrong?" And that whisper, if left unchecked, grows into a storm that drowns every intention, every dream, every ounce of initiative you've ever had. Fear makes you second guess what you already know. It turns clarity into confusion. It doesn't just stop you from deciding, it convinces you not to even begin. You keep analyzing, evaluating, measuring the risks, until the window of opportunity silently closes. And you tell yourself, maybe later, but later never comes because the habit of hesitation becomes a lifestyle. You see, decision is not just about choosing, it's about commitment. It's about drawing a mental line in the sand and saying, from this point forward, I move. It's what Napoleon Hill called definiteness of purpose, and it's the foundation of every great achievement in history. Every invention, every revolution, every empire began not with money or support or luck, but with a decision that was final, unwavering and immune to fear. But fear despises finality. It thrives in delay. It wants you to stay in the limbo of what if. It offers the illusion of safety through inaction. But in truth, there is no safety in standing still, only decay. When you delay decisions, you don't preserve your power, you drain it. Every time you avoid a choice out of fear, you weaken your own authority over your life. And let's be clear, no one avoids decisions entirely. If you don't decide your path, someone else will. The world is full of people and systems ready to hand you a default life, a job you don't love, a routine you didn't choose, a destiny you didn't design. Fear doesn't just rob you of opportunity, it hands the pen of your story to someone else. Indecision is spiritual erosion. It's a slow but steady surrender of your will. You might still appear busy, active, even productive, but inside the roots of self-trust are withering, because every avoided decision is a vote against your own strength. And over time, you begin to believe the lie that you're not capable, not ready, not worthy. That is the real cost of fear. Not just the missed chances, but the missed you. The version of yourself that only awakens when you decide, when you declare what you want, pursue it with full intent, and burn the bridge behind you. It's not about recklessness. It's about resolve. You don't need to know every step, but you do need to choose your direction. You can adapt the plan, change the methods, learn as you go, but without the initial decision, nothing moves. And in a world that's moving fast, standing still is falling behind. Ask yourself, how many moments in your life were delayed or destroyed by indecision? How many dreams have you buried beneath the weight of maybe? And more importantly, how long will you let fear keep writing your story? If there's one truth I urge you to internalize, it's this: nothing changes until you do. No book, no mentor, no motivation can substitute for a firm personal decision to move, to begin to act, to build. Once you decide, the universe begins to align, but it waits on you. Decision is energy. It commands your mind, aligns your behavior, attracts resources, and repels doubt. The moment you decide, fear begins to lose its grip, because fear cannot coexist with focused will. The two cannot live in the same space. So today, I challenge you, make a decision you've been avoiding. Speak it out loud. Write it down, cut off the escape routes. Don't ask, what if I fail? Ask, what if I never try? Because in that question lies a far greater risk. Fear kills decision. But you don't have to let it to. You can take the power back, and that begins the moment you choose to. Make the decision or live with the regret. The choice is always yours. Fear is cunning. It doesn't always announce itself with panic or paralysis. Sometimes it dresses itself up in a very respectable disguise. Reason, it whispers to you not as a saboteur, but as a friend trying to keep you safe. It pretends to protect your future while quietly erasing your present. This is how most people live in fear without ever realizing it. They don't say, I'm afraid to start a business. They say, now is not the right time. They don't admit, I'm scared of rejection. They say, I'm just being realistic. They don't confess, I don't believe in myself. They say, let me do more research first. These statements sound reasonable, responsible even, but if you peel back the surface, you'll often find the same culprit hiding underneath. Fear, and fear in this form, is far more dangerous than in its raw state. When fear is loud and clear, it can be confronted, but when it's camouflaged in logic, it slides past your defenses. It becomes part of your identity. You begin to think your hesitations are wisdom when they are in fact avoidance. Now, don't misunderstand me. Discernment is important, prudence has its place, but there's a vast difference between thoughtful planning and disguised paralysis. One is rooted in purpose, the other in doubt. The challenge is to learn the difference, and you do that by being ruthlessly honest with yourself. Ask yourself, am I preparing or postponing? Am I thinking or stalling? Am I being wise or afraid? True logic invites movement. It creates strategies, timelines, actions. Fear, disguised as logic, creates loops, endless cycles of planning without execution, dreaming without commitment, analyzing without decision. This is the silent trap that catches so many capable, intelligent individuals. Their potential isn't stolen by failure. It's stolen by excuses that sound intelligent. They become perfectionists, overthinkers, critics of their own ambitions. They think they're just being careful, but what they're really doing is building a case against their own greatness. Why does fear take this form? Because the ego is clever. It wants to protect your sense of self from embarrassment, risk, or disappointment. So it constructs a shell not of outright negativity, but of caution. And in that shell, dreams suffocate slowly without a sound. You must learn to recognize when fear is playing dress up, when it's whispering through your thoughts in a calm, reasonable voice. Because if you wait for fear to feel like fear, you'll never catch it in time. By then, it's already built walls around your courage. That's why action, even imperfect action, is so vital. Because action reveals truth. It exposes what's real and what's imagined. It slices through the illusion of fear's logic and shows you, through experience, what you're actually capable of. The antidote to fear masquerading as caution is not recklessness, it's clarity. Clarity about what matters to you. Clarity about where you're headed. Clarity about the fact that safety in excess becomes a prison. Life was never meant to be lived on standby. Progress doesn't come from waiting for us. The perfect moment, it comes from stepping forward even when your knees shake. Every person who's ever built something extraordinary, a company, a movement, a legacy, had every reason to be cautious. They had doubts, questions, fears, but they chose to move anyway. They chose progress over protection. They didn't let false logic override their inner calling. And neither should you. You already know what you need to do deep down. You know that decision you've been circling. That leap you've been delaying, that call, that launch, that change. Fear has just convinced you to call it waiting for the right time, but the right time isn't found. It's made by those who act. If fear is a master of disguise, then your job is to be a master of discernment, to ask yourself day by day, is this really logic or is this fear in a suit and tie? Because if you don't question it, you'll believe it. And if you believe it, you'll obey it. And if you obey it, you'll look back years from now and realize that fear didn't have to destroy your dreams. It only had to delay them long enough for you to forget they ever mattered. So peel back the layers, see fear for what it is, and then choose to move anyway, not without fear, but in spite of it. Because the true victory isn't in being fearless. It's in being fearless enough to act through the disguise.